Hello. Today we are going to answer the question that has perplexed language students for ages. What is verb conjugation? First of all, we have to answer the question, what is a verb? A verb is a word showing an action, occurrence, or state of being. And when you're studying a language like Spanish, you will see the words in the dictionary or on your vocab list for class listed in the infinitive. And the infinitive does kind of come from the word infinity, because when the verb's in the infinitive, you have an infinite number of possibilities of who is doing the verb or when the verb is happening or what the speaker's mood is about it. Once you've put your ending on your verb, it's not infinite anymore. But some examples of infinitives, the word work to work in Spanish is trabajar. That's an infinitive, and you can tell because it still has the AR attached to the end. We have not changed the ending yet. That's what makes it the infinitive. The infinitive to eat in Spanish is comer, and the infinitive to write is escribir. And please notice I put in purple there the AR, ER, and IR. Those are the three main groups of regular verbs in Spanish. Okay, next, what is conjugation? The word conjugation means union, fusion, bringing together, or combining. And we'll see in a little while why with verbs we call it conjugation, because we're going to be bringing together, uniting, combining the stem and the ending. But with verbs, with grammar, conjugation means changing the verb to express the person, number, tense, mood, and voice. So for example, in English, with the word to write, we can say he writes. I changed the word a little bit, didn't I? I changed the verb to tell the person, he, to tell the number, it's one person, he, not they, to tell the tense, it's happening now, it's in the present, he writes, to tell the mood, and it's a little not sure, but it's probably here the indicative mood, that we're telling a fact because we don't have any information to the contrary, and also telling the voice. This is called active voice. Other examples of how I can change the word write is I can say written, it was written. I can say wrote. I can say they are writing. So I'm changing the word write to express different things. Especially, we're going to be talking mostly today about the person and number. Who is doing the writing? And when I conjugate the verb, I change the meaning a little bit. Now, in English, we do conjugate verbs a little bit. For example, when we get to the word she in these examples, I do have to change it from I write, you write. I do have to change or conjugate the verb a little bit and make it she writes. But as you can see in this example, really there's only one case out of 5 here where I have to change the verb or conjugate it. And in some of the tenses or moods in English, I don't have to change it at all. So once I've changed the word write into wrote here for the past tense, it's I wrote, you wrote, she wrote, we wrote, they wrote. Once I've changed it into the past, I don't have to change it depending on the person doing the writing. But in Spanish, I do. And every time I conjugate a verb in a certain tense or mood, I'm going to have 6 different ways to spell it. And you're always going to see this shape, a box with 2 columns and 3 rows. Why does your teacher always put it in this shape? I mean, why not put a hexagon or a triangle or a heart? Why does it have to be this shape? And it's because the shape has meaning. The first column is for singular. That means one person. The second column is for plural. That means more than one person. And then the 3 rows are for first person, second person, and third person. And the first person singular, if you think of a book written in the first person, it means that the narrator, the protagonist is narrating their own story. So in the book, it's like, I did this, I went here. So the first person singular pronoun is I. The second person, if it's a book written in the second person, like a Choose Your Own Adventure series, it's talking to you, to the reader. So the second person singular is you. And then the third person singular, if a book's written in the third person, it means that when you open it, it doesn't say like I went to the store. It says he or she went. So that would be the third person singular in English. Now the plural, you're going to think of the singular box plus a bunch of other people. So if the first person singular is I, the first person plural is I plus other people. I plus a bunch of other people. Well, that's we. That would be the pronoun I would use. The second person plural, You plus some other people. That's still just you. And your teacher in Spanish class might call it you all of you, y'all. Those are correct too. I mean, you is just the simplest way to say it in English, but using words like y'all or you all or all of you helps express the fact that it's plural. And then finally, the third person plural, he or she, plus some other people, the pronoun is they. Now for Spanish, you'll see here I snuck in at the very bottom a little bit of a confusing thing. I stuck 2 extra U's in there. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Spanish, one thing that makes it special is different is we have a third person singular and plural you, and we use those for different forms of politeness. But first, let's look at how do you say these words in Spanish. The word for I is yo, you is tú, and that's the second person singular form of you, that's tú. He is él, she is ella, and you, the formal, the polite version is usted. Nosotros, or it could be nosotras, if it's for a group of women and the speaker is also a woman, that means we. Vosotros or vosotras, that's the plural of you, the plural second person you. And again, vosotras is used only for a group of women. And then ellos and ellas both mean they, depending on if it's a group of men, a mixed group of men and women, or only a group of women. For only women, we use ellas. And then the third person plural, you, which also means, again, all of you all, is ustedes. Let's talk about the you for a second. Why on earth are there 4 different ways to say you in Spanish? Every language is different, and one of the things that makes Spanish and some other languages also kind of special is having different forms of politeness for the person that you're talking to. Recognizing that if you talk to a person who is in a different position of authority from you, maybe you want to be more polite and change it to a different way of addressing them. So the informal singular, the second person singular in Spanish is tú. And when do you use that word? When you're talking to somebody who's your friend or your peer, someone who's equal to you in status and social status, or also someone who's subordinate to you. So if you're an adult and you're talking to a child, you would address them as tú. The usted form is the formal singular. And this means that you're talking to someone who's older than you, an elder, maybe someone who's a stranger. So they're the same age as you, but they're a stranger, so you're trying to treat them with extra respect and not with closeness or intimacy. Or someone who's superior to you in social status, like your boss, or if you're a student, the teacher or the principal would be, you address them as usted. The second person plural is vosotros or vosotras. And sometimes your teacher might call this informal, meaning not formal, not, meaning kind of casual. You're not being extra polite to the person. This one is plural though, so it's for talking to friends, peers, or equals, or subordinates to you. And then finally, ustedes is the formal and plural. This is what you would use when you're addressing a group, like when you want to say, like, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome all of you to this event. It's for when you're talking to a group of people who are elders, strangers, superiors to you. It's for when you're trying to be extra polite.
The vosotros form is used only in Spain. In Latin America, you would use the ustedes form for both informal and formal situations.
So now finally, let's talk about what exactly is this verb conjugation thing then? Well, one way to think of verb conjugation is like using a drill when you're trying to build something, do some construction. First, you've got your drill, and the drill is the base. The drill is big, expensive, and you only have one of them. You can use it for a lot of different jobs, but you need the little different drill bits. And the drill bits are interchangeable. There's many of them. You have a lot of choices, and you use a different bit depending on what job you're trying to accomplish. Same thing with verb conjugation. You're going to have something called a stem and then something called an ending. And the stem is going to stay the same for the verb, and it expresses the meaning. And then the ending is going to change to a lot of different choices. And the ending is going to express, as we said before, the person, the number, the tense, the mood. So for example, with the word bailar means to dance. We want to find the stem. And the way you find a stem of a verb in Spanish is by dropping off the AR or ER or IR at the end. So the stem of bailar, to dance, is bail. And here's some other examples of verb stems. Trabajar turns into trabaj. I got that just by dropping off the AR. Leer turns into le. And the stem of escribir is escrib. I got that just by dropping off the IR. So now we're ready to conjugate. We have our stem. And what are our endings going to be? Well, it depends on if it's an AR, ER, or IR verb. And you definitely need to memorize these. So for AR verbs in the present tense, in Spanish, the endings are o, as, a, amos, ais, an. And you might notice in books or your teacher writing it like this on the board with a hyphen. That's to show that it's not a full word. It's just part of a word. It's just an ending. And so if you want to say I dance, you're going to put the bail part, the stem, and then you're going to put the o at the ending to say that it's in the yo form. So now we're ready to conjugate. We have our stem and we have our endings. In Spanish, another thing that's kind of special or different and unique is that the subject pronouns, yo, tú, él, ella, usted, nosotros, vosotros, ellos, ellas, ustedes, most of the time they're actually optional in a sentence or question. You don't have to put them because the ending is already expressing who is doing the activity. This is different from a lot of other languages. So for example, if you see bailo, you don't even have to have the yo. You know that I am doing the dancing because it ends with o, and the o ending means it's in the yo form. When you see bailamos, you already know who is doing the dancing. It's we, nosotros, because amos means it's in the nosotros form. When you see bailas, it could be a question, bailas, or it could be a sentence, bailas, and you know that you, tú, is the person doing the dancing because the ending as means it's in the tú form. Okay, here's another analogy. Conjugating verbs is like making a pizza, serving a pizza. Why is that? Okay, I know some of you are going to disagree with me on this one, but theoretically, to make a pizza, you have to have the crust and the sauce and the cheese. That's just like the base. That's like the stem of the verb. It's the required. All of the pizzas are going to have that as their base. But depending on who is eating the pizza, the toppings will change. So that's kind of like the endings. We can tell whose piece of pizza it is based on what toppings are on it, just like we can tell with a verb who is doing the action based on the endings. So for example, with the word comer, to eat, the stem is com. I got that by just dropping off the ER at the end. And these are going to be my ER verb endings. They're a little bit different from the AR. Basically, everywhere where there used to be an A, now we've replaced it with an E. And I'm going to choose my correct ending depending on who is doing the eating. So I've got my stem, com, and I've got my endings, o, es, e, hemos, eis, en. I want to say he eats. I'm looking at my verb box. There's a blue word, el, that means he. And I know that the ending is going to be just the letter E. So I'm going to say él come. And I put the L in parentheses because remember that word is kind of optional in Spanish. You can put it for extra clarity or emphasis, but you don't have to. Come by itself means he eats. Él come means he eats. If you want to say we eat, it's going to be nosotros. That means we. Could be nosotras as well. And I use my stem, com, and then I stick on my ending, hemos. Nosotros comemos. That means we eat. Or I can just say comemos. That also means we eat. Finally, I told you there was another group of verbs. There's the AR, ER, and IR. These are the IR endings in the present tense. Let's do a little review here. We'll just practice conjugating 3 verbs. First, the verb to work. When you look it up in the dictionary or on your vocab list, the infinitive is trabajar. I know it's the infinitive because it still has the AR attached. The stem is trabaj. I get that by dropping off the AR. So in my verb box, I'm going to put trabaj 6 times, and then I'm going to put my correct endings. Trabajo, trabajas, trabaja, trabajamos, trabajáis, trabajan. Another example, this one's an ER verb, leer. It means to read, leer. The infinitive is leer. My ending is it's an ER verb, and the stem is le. So I'm going to put le plus all of my ER endings. Leo, lees, lee, leemos, leéis, leen. Finally, an IR verb to write. The infinitive is escribir. It's an IR verb, so I need to choose my IR endings. And the stem, which I find by dropping off the IR, is escrib. These are IR endings. Yo escribo, tú escribes, él, ella, usted escribe, nosotros escribimos, vosotros escribís, ellos, ellas, ustedes escriben. Finally, just as sort of like a preview of what's coming up, great job memorizing the AR, ER, and IR endings. There are these things called irregular verbs, and irregular verbs mean they don't follow the pattern. So, for example, in English, the pattern of putting something in the past tense is typically, for a regular verb, you just stick the ED at the end. So, I work is the present, I worked, that's the past. They study in the present. In the past, they studied. I stick an ED at the end. You go. But then do you say you goed? You know, you hear little children say that sometimes by mistake because they haven't quite mastered the irregular verbs yet in their own language. No, you don't say you goed, you say you went. Wow, that doesn't look anything like the word go. So, you know, this one's called an irregular verb in English. It doesn't follow the pattern in the past tense. And in Spanish, there's lots of irregular verbs, and the irregular verbs differ depending on which tense and which mood you're talking about. But here's some examples of verbs that are irregular in a lot of the tenses. There's also something in Spanish called the stem changing verbs. These are verbs that use the regular endings for AR, ER, and IR verbs, but something different changes in the stem of the verb, in the beginning part of the verb. And that'll be something else you'll learn soon from your teacher. Finally, I really recommend this website, wordreference.com. It's an online dictionary, but it also has other tools, for example, thesaurus. And one of the awesome things is this thing I circled here, the conjugación button, the conjugation button. You want to click conjugación ES, that's for Espanol, not the EN, that one's for English. But when you click on it, like for example with the verb escribir, it brings up all the different verb charts for that verb in all the different tenses. The one I taught you in this video was the first one there, indicativo presente, the present indicative. But as you can see, there's all these other different tenses. There's the past tense, the future tense, conditional tense. There's this thing called the subjunctive mood. There's this thing called the imperative for giving commands. And all these different tenses each have their own verb box with 6 different spellings of the word. So for example, you'll see here with the word escribir, theoretically, and a couple of them are the same as each other, but theoretically there's 6 different verbs in each box times approximately 15 different tenses and moods. There's about 90 different ways to say the word right in Spanish. But believe it or not, you will eventually, with time and with practice, and you will eventually learn them all, and it will just sound natural to you. Okay, so hopefully this video helped explain a little bit what is verb conjugation in Spanish. Good luck.